a betrayed husband, a treacherous friend, and the man behind his father's death. He chose to seek revenge through silence. I have always believed that a human life doesn't collapse with a thunderous explosion. No, it often decays quietly, like a thread pulled loose from a perfectly tailored suit, and by the time you notice, you are already naked amidst the storm. For me, everything started with a message. The soft buzz of the phone rang out just as I was buried in a pile of financial reports at the office, right in the heart of London's prosperous yet cold financial district. A quick glance at the screen showed the name Emma, my wife. I thought it would be a reminder about dinner, or simply a question about the weekend plan at our countryside villa in the Cotswolds. But no, what I received was a short, ice-cold sentence. I want a divorce. All communication should go through my lawyer. Emma. I froze. In 15 years of marriage, Emma had never been the joking type. Yet this time, I still hoped it was just a terrible joke. I waited for another message, an explanation. Nothing came. Only silence. No warning signs. No arguments. No coldness. Just the night before, we were still sitting together at the dinner table, discussing investment expansion and an upcoming vacation. And now, with just a few dry words, she erased the past entirely. I don't remember how long I sat there, hands still gripping the phone, heart beating slowly as if trying to comprehend what had just happened. Shock, hurt, anger. All of those emotions churned beneath the cold mask I had forged after years of navigating the corporate battlefield. Finally, I typed a single word. Understood. If she wanted everything to be cold and professional, I would give her exactly that. I put down the phone and took a deep breath. Reason began to replace emotion. Emma had chosen a lawyer as the intermediary. That meant from this moment on, all unspoken agreements within the marriage no longer held any value. We had always kept our finances separate, a lesson learned from my parents' infamous divorce. But she forgot one thing. Most of the comforts she had been enjoying were under my name. I opened my laptop and logged into the bank account. 3 supplementary credit cards under Emma's name, canceled. The monthly allowance I'd been transferring into her personal account stopped immediately. Netflix, Prime, Spotify, all joint services registered under my name. Signed out of all devices, passwords changed. The Audi that Emma drove every day, the lease was under my name. I didn't cancel the insurance right away because of legal risk, but I made a note to discuss it with my lawyer. It took me about 30 minutes to sever all financial ties between her and me. Not out of hatred, simply to adapt to the new rules of the game that Emma had set. She wanted a lawyer? Then everything would proceed within proper legal standards, without emotion. 1 hour later, an email from Emma's lawyer, Mr. Victor Peterson, appeared in my inbox. I didn't read it. Instead, I forwarded it directly to Charlotte Hayes, my most trusted personal attorney, the one who had helped me win multiple complex business disputes. I simply messaged her one line. Urgent consultation. Divorce. Asset protection. When I finished my work that day and returned to the penthouse apartment, I realized the house was empty. Emma had left. Quietly, neatly, just like how she sent the message. Not a single note, not a word of goodbye. That night, I slept strangely well. Perhaps because, deep down, I knew this was only the tip of the iceberg. And I was right. 3 days after receiving the divorce message, I received the first call from an unknown number. In the quiet office, the ringtone rang out like a reminder that the storm was truly about to arrive. I looked at the phone screen, a clear premonition telling me this was Victor Peterson, Emma's lawyer. I picked up, trying to keep my tone calm. Lucas Bennett speaking. On the other end was a middle-aged male voice, sharp, cold, and impatient. Mr. Bennett, this is Victor Peterson, legal representative for Emma Bennett. I gave a slight smile and leaned back in my chair. I know. What seems to be the matter, Mr. Peterson? He didn't beat around the bush. My client is facing serious difficulties. Her accounts have been frozen, her credit cards declined, and she has no financial means to cover essential needs. This is an act of bad faith and goes against the principle of financial stability during a separation. I replied with a polite tone, cold enough for him to grasp the matter. Mr. Peterson, my wife, or rather, your client, messaged me on Tuesday, requesting a divorce and stating that all matters must go through her lawyer. I've complied precisely with that directive. All financial arrangements that lacked formal legal binding have been terminated immediately. Silence from the other end for a few seconds before he raised his voice in accusation. You acted in bad faith by cutting off her financial support without prior notice. I let out a soft laugh. She's the one who unilaterally ended the marriage through a text message, Mr. Peterson. She's the one who broke the principles of trust and communication. From now on, all financial support matters will be discussed through you and my lawyer, Charlotte Hayes. I believe you've received her information. Victor paused. The sound of papers flipping echoed faintly. She needs money right now for accommodation and living expenses. He tried to salvage the situation. I feigned surprise. Accommodation? I thought she was still living in the apartment that I own. No longer relevant. She's moved out. His voice started to waver. I smirked. Then, sir, this is no longer a matter between husband and wife. If she needs emergency support, please submit a formal request to my lawyer. I could hear the sound of clenched teeth before Victor coldly muttered, "Very well. We'll see each other in court. As your client wishes." I replied, then hung up. My chest rose and fell. Outwardly calm, I knew well this was only the prologue. That afternoon, Charlotte called me from her office. "Lucas, I've just received an emergency support request from Victor Peterson. She wants you to cover all living costs, plus new rent fees and legal expenses." I let out a bitter laugh. What does she think I am, a charity fund? Charlotte continued, her voice laced with both concern and reluctant admiration. "The way you handled the initial situation was legally sound. Cutting off financial support, not legally bound, is entirely within your rights. But Lucas, I have to warn you, from now on, they'll play dirty." I was silent for a few seconds, then asked, "What do you think their next move will be?" Charlotte didn't need long to answer. "They'll go after your reputation and your job. Maybe anonymous complaints, fabricating claims about abuse of power or mental instability." I nodded, though I knew she couldn't see it. "Good. Let's see what tricks they can pull." Just as predicted, 2 days later, I got a call from Human Resources. "Lucas, we've received an anonymous complaint about you using company property for personal purposes and showing signs of unstable behavior recently." I smiled gently, my voice calm. "I'm happy to cooperate with any investigation. Please feel free to check all access history and devices. I always use my personal phone and laptop for private matters." The internal investigation wrapped up within a day. All allegations were groundless. But I knew this was just the first shot in a series of covert attacks that Emma and Victor were preparing. That evening, Haley's name, Emma's closest friend, lit up on my phone. I picked up, already anticipating the content of the call. "Lucas, are you insane? You cut off all of Emma's money. She can't even buy food. She's sleeping on my couch right now." I sighed. "Haley, Emma chose this path. She demanded a divorce through text and asked for all communication to go through a lawyer. I'm just doing exactly what she asked. But you know she doesn't have stable income. You've always taken care of her. How could you be so cruel now?" I replied coldly. If she wanted to negotiate, she should have talked directly, not thrown me into a legal war from the start. "She'll take everything from you. Don't get cocky." I sneered. "She can try. I'm not talking about this anymore. Goodbye." I hung up, feeling like I just brushed away a poisonous gust of wind. I understood clearly. Emma was building the image of a victim, painting me as a cold, heartless man. But I didn't care. She chose this game, so I would show her what true coldness looked like. I have always believed that in this world, the most dangerous enemy isn't the one standing in front of you, but the one behind your back, smiling when you turn around. And I was proven right. When the name Daniel Cross appeared in an anonymous email sent directly to my company's board of directors the next morning. The subject line was chilling. Internal report. Lucas Bennett's violation of professional ethics and financial fraud. The sender? An anonymous email address, but the contents inside could only have been written by someone who knew every internal process, the numbers, and even the seemingly harmless vulnerabilities of mine. Only one person knew all of that. Daniel, my best friend for over 10 years, and also a strategic partner in the company. I read every line, my eyes gradually turning to steel. He didn't just make vague accusations. He held detailed information that only closed-door meetings between him and me would reveal. Distorted numbers, clipped contract clauses designed to portray me as a greedy, position-abusing man. I leaned back in my chair, feeling a strange mix of amusement and contempt. So this was the real game. Emma wasn't the only one behind it all. Daniel had partnered with her long ago, perhaps ever since I started trusting him unconditionally. Charlotte called me just as I was reviewing those fabricated pieces of evidence. "Lucas, I just received a copy of the complaint that the board forwarded. I know what you're thinking." I cut her off. "Daniel." Charlotte sighed. "Yes, I've traced recent transactions from Emma's account, and there's a suspicious payment made from one of Daniel's subsidiary companies to her account about a month ago." I closed my eyes. The puzzle pieces were falling into place. They're trying to push me into prison, steal my shares and reputation, and live off the empire I built. Charlotte nodded on the other end of the line. But they made a big mistake. I opened my eyes, the corners of my mouth curving into a slight smile. They assumed I would play by their rules. That evening, I arranged a meeting with Daniel at a luxurious bar, the place where we once raised glasses to celebrate countless business victories. He arrived on time, still in a tailored suit and his familiar diplomatic smile. But this time, I could see behind that mask was a barely concealed arrogance. "Lucas, I heard you've run into some trouble lately." He sipped his whiskey, eyes probing. I smiled as well, raising my glass. "Just minor issues. A few people don't understand me as well as you do." Daniel laughed, but I saw a flicker of caution in his eyes. I leaned forward slightly, lowering my voice. "We've been friends for a long time. I know that if anyone truly understands my weaknesses, it's you." Daniel shrugged, feigning innocence. "Lucas, what are you implying?" I looked him straight in the eye, the smile fading. "I'm implying that whoever stabbed me in the back should prepare for retaliation." Daniel froze, but only for a moment before regaining composure. "You have no proof." I stood up and placed a USB drive on the table. "You're wrong. What I have is a trap, and you stepped into it long ago." I turned and walked away, leaving Daniel sitting there, pale-faced for the first time I had ever seen him like that. When I returned home, Charlotte was already waiting in my study. "I recorded your entire conversation with Daniel. The USB was just bait, but enough to make him panic." I sat down, eyes sharp. "Now, it's our turn to attack." Charlotte nodded and spread out the documents she had gathered over the past week. Shell contracts, secret accounts, and illegal investments under Daniel's name. "We'll send everything to the Financial Crimes Investigation Bureau." I looked at the evidence, feeling like the scent of blood had spread throughout the room. What will Emma do when she finds out Daniel's been exposed? Charlotte smirked. She'll betray him to save herself. But we won't let her off easy either. I nodded, feeling every cell in my body ignite with a sensation I hadn't touched in a long time. The satisfaction of controlling the board. In business, I learned one thing. A good lawyer protects you, but a dangerous lawyer knows exactly when to strike. Charlotte Hayes wasn't just a good lawyer. She was a woman who understood what it meant to strike at an enemy's blind spot. That night, while I was reviewing the case files, Charlotte unexpectedly placed a thick dossier in front of me. It wasn't documentation on Daniel or Emma, but a completely different name. Victor Hale. I frowned, a cold chill running down my spine. "That name?" Charlotte nodded, her eyes not leaving mine. "He's not just a senior lawyer. He was directly involved in your father's death." My heart skipped a beat. "What are you talking about, Charlotte?" She opened the file, flipping to an old photo. My father, Edward Bennett, shaking hand with a silver-haired man with a razor-sharp face. It was Victor Hale. He was your father's silent partner in black financial operations. But when your father wanted out, Victor set a trap, causing him to accidentally die on the highway. I clenched my fists, old memories flooding back like a nightmare. "So, Emma and Daniel were just minor pawns." Charlotte nodded, her voice dropping lower. "Victor Hale is the true puppet master behind it all." I stared at her, a question flashing in my mind. "How do you know all this?" Charlotte pursed her lips, her eyes dimming. Because my father was also a victim of Victor Hale. The air in the room grew heavy. I hadn't expected that between Charlotte and me was such a deep connection. She told me about her past. Her father was an honest auditor who once investigated Victor's wrongdoings. But before he could reveal the truth, he mysteriously disappeared. Charlotte didn't enter law for passion alone, but for a mission: to bring down Victor Hale. Now, our paths had converged perfectly. What do we need to expose him? I asked, my eyes blazing. Charlotte spread out Victor's network chart on the table. He's careful, never leaving direct traces. But he has one weakness. She pointed at a name among the shell companies. Arcturus Holdings, a financial corporation he uses for money laundering. If we can trace its money trail, he won't be able to deny anything. I nodded, my brain working at full speed. Do we need technical support? Charlotte smiled mysteriously. I've already contacted a hacker, someone you won't expect. The door to the office opened. A tall, lean man walked in, wearing a cap pulled low over his face. I stood up immediately as I recognized him. Nathan Cole. Nathan, once my rival in a major tech deal 3 years ago. He had disappeared from the financial scene after a massive data scandal. Charlotte folded her arms. Nathan is my cousin. The scandal back then? It was Victor Hale's trap. Nathan pulled out a chair, sitting down with a bitter smile. I owe Victor a blood debt, and now I'm going to collect. I looked at the two of them, feeling like I had just been handed a sharpened dagger. How long until you can breach Arcturus' system? Nathan opened his laptop, lines of code already flooding the screen. Give me 48 hours. 2 days later, we had what Victor Hale feared the most. A list of illegal transactions, along with proof of funds being funneled into Emma and Daniel's accounts from Victor's shell companies. Charlotte clutched the folder, her eyes blazing. This is our ticket to take him to court. I shook my head, a calculating smile on my lips. No, we won't take him to court yet. Charlotte looked at me, puzzled. I want to play one final game and make him destroy his own empire with his own hands. Some secrets aren't buried because people forget them. They're buried because someone deliberately hides them. I stood before the old mansion on the outskirts of London, a place I hadn't returned to in over 15 years. This was once my parents' home, a place where both childhood memories and the ghosts of the past still quietly lingered. Charlotte stepped out of the car, holding the thick dossier. Nathan followed behind, his eyes scanning the surroundings cautiously as if any bush might be hiding danger. Are we really sure we need to come here? Nathan asked, unable to hide his discomfort. Charlotte nodded. In Lucas's father's will, there was mention of a secret safe. But during the inheritance process, it wasn't listed anywhere. Victor Hale must have missed something. I clenched my fists and pushed open the rotting wooden door. The scent of mildew and time hit me like a slap from the past. We split up to search the house. I returned to my father's old study, the room where he used to sit for hours at his wooden desk, writing and calculating plans I was once too young to understand. After nearly an hour of fruitless searching, my eyes stopped at a painting on the wall, a painting of a boat drifting through fog. Something inside told me to trust that instinct. I took down the painting. Behind it was a section of wall in a different color. Nathan appeared behind me and quickly understood. He pulled out a small knife and gently cut through the plaster. Click! A small hidden door revealed itself, and inside, an old, dust-covered safe. Charlotte entered, eyes lit with hope. Do you remember the code? I gave a faint smile. The day I was born, and the day he died. I turned the dial, 1507 to 2311. A soft click echoed, and the safe opened, revealing a bundle of leather-bound documents and an old voice recorder. I picked up the recorder, my palm trembling. Charlotte looked at me and said softly, "Play it." I pressed play. Static filled the air. Then my father's deep, raspy voice began, thick with a weight like the whole world was pressing on him. If you're hearing this recording, it means I couldn't protect you from Victor Hale. He wasn't just a partner. He was the mastermind of a criminal network. I used to be a part of it, until I wanted out. But no one leaves Victor alive. Son, don't seek revenge. Live. Erase everything he stands for. The recording ended with a long, weary sigh. I stood motionless. A choking sense of grief rose in my throat. Charlotte placed a hand on my shoulder, her gaze steady. "We'll do exactly what he asked. But not just erase, we'll annihilate." Nathan had already plugged the USB into his laptop, backing up all the data from a safe. "There's enough evidence in here to drag Victor and his whole crew into hell," he muttered with a crooked grin. I nodded. My eyes were no longer those of a betrayed businessman. Now I was the man holding the trigger of a purge. It's time to make Victor Hale face the demons he created. That night, in Charlotte's secret base, we meticulously laid out the plan for the final blow. "We'll release the recording along with the entire dataset to the internal network of the underground financial world," Charlotte said, pointing at the web of connections mapped out on the screen. Nathan added, "But before that, Lucas needs to lure Victor into a fake agreement. Once he signs it, it'll be the same as him admitting everything." I folded my arms, thinking aloud. He's not as easy to trap as Daniel. Charlotte smiled mysteriously. "He'll fall for it if the person handing him the agreement is Emma." I turned sharply, eyes like blades. "You think she'll betray Victor?" Charlotte nodded with certainty. "A person like Emma, when she sees the ship sinking, will be the first to jump, as long as there's a lifeboat." I let out a cold laugh, the gears already turning in my mind. "Then let me show her that lifeboat." Emma had always been a clever woman, but what made her dangerous wasn't just her intellect. It was her ambition, wrapped in elegance. Charlotte was right. For people like Emma, loyalty only existed when it brought benefits. When the ship starts taking on water, she wouldn't hesitate to step on anyone to swim to shore. And I would be the one to build that false shore of salvation. 3 days later, I arranged a private meeting with Emma at a luxurious hotel. She appeared in her usual designer dress, her face meticulously made up as if everything was still under control. But I could see in her eyes, worry was gnawing away at her. "Lucas," Emma spoke first, voice tinged with sarcasm, "surprised you wanted to meet me. I thought you preferred dealing through lawyers." I smiled faintly, pouring her a glass of wine. "Some matters are best negotiated in person, especially when they concern your future." Emma raised an eyebrow, her eyes a mix of curiosity and caution. "My future?" I placed a folder in front of her, clearly labeled, "Personal Asset Protection Agreement." She flipped through the first few pages, her expression shifting as she read the content. "What is this?" I leaned back, voice calm but firm. "Victor Hale isn't as untouchable as you think. Law enforcement and financial circles are starting to take notice. If you stay aligned with him, you'll go down with him." Emma scoffed, but her hand tightened unconsciously around her wine glass. "Are you threatening me?" I tilted my head, looking her straight in the eye. "No, I'm giving you a way out." I pointed at the final clause in the agreement. "Party A, Emma Bennett, agrees to provide information and cooperate to neutralize the illegal financial activities of Victor Hale in exchange for legal immunity and protection of personal assets." Emma was silent for a long time. I could see the battle raging inside her mind. On one side, her feigned loyalty to Victor, a man of power. On the other, her own survival and wealth. Eventually, survival won. "What guarantees do I have?" Emma asked slowly. I smiled slightly and pulled from my jacket a stamped confidentiality agreement from Charlotte's law firm. "You'll be protected, but only if you get Victor to sign this contract." I slid over another folder. The fake investment agreement Nathan and Charlotte had crafted, disguised as a new business deal. Emma skimmed through it, her sharp eyes regaining their edge. "You really are a sly fox, Lucas." I smirked. "So are you. Which is exactly why I know you'll pull this off." Emma laughed. Not with mockery this time, but with a mutual recognition between two people who had once been married but were never truly allies. "Fine. I'll get him to sign." 3 days later, a message from Charlotte appeared on my phone just past midnight. He signed. The plan worked. I stood on the balcony of my apartment, staring down at the stream of London traffic under the city lights. A strange chill crept into my chest. We had sprung the trap. Victor Hale, the man once thought untouchable, had just signed his own downfall. But I knew, a cornered beast doesn't die quietly. The next morning, just as predicted, Victor Hale realized he had been trapped. But instead of fleeing, he chose to strike back. Charlotte called me in a panic. "Lucas, he's kidnapped Nathan." My grip on the phone tightened. The blood in my veins turned to ice. "What does he want?" He sent me a message. "If you want your cousin to survive, Lucas must hand over the original data and withdraw all charges." I closed my eyes, inhaling deeply. Victor didn't disappoint. He understood the rules of power far too well. "Get ready, Charlotte. It's time to end this game." There are moments when no matter how clever or calculated you are, you still get cornered. This was no longer a game of wits. It was life and death. I stared at my phone screen, where Victor Hale's message was still flashing. 11 p.m. tonight. Alone. No police. Or you'll receive Nathan's body before sunrise. Charlotte stood beside me, her face pale with worry. Her fists clenched so tightly, her nails dug into her skin. "Lucas, we can't face him alone. We need backup." I shook my head, eyes steely. "If we bring in the police now, Nathan will die instantly." Victor isn't the type to spare a hostage because he's afraid of the law. Charlotte bit her lip, her eyes red with anguish. I knew how much Nathan meant to her. Not just a cousin, but the only person willing to bet his life on this mission. "Trust me, I have a plan," I said, try to reassure her. But the truth was, for the first time, I was forced to bet on luck. 11 p.m., abandoned industrial zone, East London. I stepped into the crumbling warehouse, lit only by dim yellow bulbs, just enough to reveal the silhouettes waiting in silence. Victor Hale stood tall, still dressed in a fine suit, looking as if he were hosting a board meeting instead of kidnapping. Nathan was tied to a chair, mouth gagged, blood seeping from a wound on his forehead. But in his eyes, defiance still burned. He hadn't broken. "Right on time, Lucas," Victor said, his voice deep and menacing. I moved forward, unarmed, maintaining composure under the scrutiny of his armed henchmen. "Let Nathan go. I'll give you the original data," I said, tossing a USB toward him. Victor caught it, smiling disdainfully. "You think I'm stupid enough to believe this is the only copy?" I didn't reply. I simply stared at him, waiting for the moment. Victor stepped closer, his gaze sharp as a blade. "You're smart, Lucas. Smarter than your father ever was." He begged me for mercy. You resist. But in this world, the strong are those who hold the gun, not the USB. He gestured. One of his men pressed a gun to Nathan's temple. One command, and this boy's brain splatters across the floor. I slowed my breathing, then let a faint smile curl my lips. "So what's next, Victor? Kill me? Kill Charlotte? Then think it'll all be buried forever." Victor laughed, a deep, mocking sound that echoed through the warehouse. "No, Lucas, I won't kill you yet. I'll make you live, stripped of everything, just like your father begged me before his car accidentally crashed." That sentence was the signal. The moment he mentioned my father, I pressed the small button on my wristwatch, a mini recording device Nathan had built before his capture. Victor's words had just been broadcast live to Charlotte's device, hidden outside the perimeter. Seconds later, police sirens wailed in the distance. Floodlights lit up the entire area. "Damn it," Victor roared, realizing the trap. I lunged forward, slamming into the man holding Nathan at gunpoint. A shot rang out, grazing my shoulder, burning hot. Nathan kicked backward, toppling the chair while I pulled a hidden knife from my sleeve and cut his ropes. Victor's men scattered, firing wildly as a tactical police unit stormed in. Victor tried to escape through the back exit, but Charlotte was already there, gun aimed squarely at him. "Game's over, Victor," she said, her voice steady with rage. He snarled like a beast cornered, but surrendered when the other officers surrounded him. As Victor Hale was cuffed and dragged away, I collapsed onto the cold concrete, blood soaking through my sleeve. Nathan sat beside me, breathing hard but smiling weakly. "You're insane, Lucas," he whispered. I gave a dry laugh, gazing up at the broken warehouse, ceiling, and the stars beyond. "Yeah, but at least we're still alive." Charlotte approached, her expression finally softening after days of tension. Victor's entire confession was recorded. He'll never rise again. I nodded, but deep down I knew, even if Victor was finished, the shadows he created still lingered. 3 days after Victor Hale's arrest, I sat alone in the apartment, staring at the gray London sky. I had thought the feeling of victory would be sweet, but what I felt instead was a quiet, hollow emptiness. My phone buzzed. It was Charlotte. Latest update, Lucas. Victor has officially been charged with dozens of criminal offenses. He'll never leave prison. Her voice carried a touch of relief, though I could still sense her caution. What about Emma and Daniel? I asked, eyes still fixed on the window. Charlotte sighed. Emma's confessed everything about Daniel in exchange for a lighter sentence. Daniel was arrested this morning. Emma, she's negotiating with prosecutors. She might avoid jail, but most of her assets have been frozen. I nodded slightly. Everything was unfolding exactly as I had predicted. The minor pawns were turning on each other as the empire collapsed. But I knew there was still one card left unplayed. That night, while I was reviewing the file Charlotte had sent, an unfamiliar black envelope was slipped under my door. I walked over and picked it up. No return address. Only my name, written in a delicate script. Inside was a short letter. Lucas, we've been watching you for a long time. You've proven that you're not just a survivor. You know how to wield silence as a weapon to eliminate your enemies. If you're ready to step into a different world, one without laws, governed only by power and the fragile balance between shadow and light, come to the location written on this card. The real game is just beginning. PL. Attached was a sleek black metal card, engraved with a single phrase. The silent order. I ran my fingers across the metal. My palm turned cold. The silent order, a name I had only vaguely heard of in Victor Hale's secret documents, but never seen confirmed. An underground organization that didn't belong to any nation, corporation, or government. They were the ones behind the scenes of the world. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, looking into the eyes of a man who had survived betrayal, vengeance, and the razor-thin line of morality. I knew I had two choices. Forget everything. Live out the rest of my days like a ghost in a world of artificial peace. Or keep going. Step into the greater game, where silence is not just a shield, but the language of dominion. I took the card, slipped it into my coat pocket. As I left the cafe by the coast, I looked toward the horizon, dyed red by the setting sun, and whispered, every game needs someone willing to flip the board. And this time, I'll be the one who holds it. The sea wind blew harder, carrying with it the opening chords of a new chapter rising from the underworld. 6 months after Victor Hale was sentenced, the world seemed to have forgotten everything. The news of financial scandals, the collapse of shell corporations, and the high-profile trials, all slowly replaced by fresh celebrity gossip, meaningless entertainment, and the next viral headline. But for me, the wounds from that war still bled. Not on my skin, but in my mind. I sat alone at a seaside cafe in Scotland, where no one knew that I was Lucas Bennett, the man who had once made London tremble. Here, I was just a stranger sipping espresso, letting the wind slap cold across my face, watching the tide come and go. Charlotte had returned to her legal career. Nathan had left the UK altogether, starting a new life in Canada, far from chaos and consequence. As for me, I chose silence. No more meetings, no more spotlights, no more phone calls inviting me to galas or asking for my take on billion-dollar deals. And strangely enough, I found peace in that solitude. One afternoon, while I was reading, a server brought me a black envelope. No sender, just my name again. I opened it slowly. Inside was a short letter. Lucas, we've been watching. You are not merely a survivor. You are a man who knows how to kill with silence. If you are ready to walk into a different world, a world where there are no laws, only power, and the fragile balance between light and shadow, then come to the location on the card. The real game has just begun. PL. Enclosed was a sleek, black metal card, engraved with a single phrase. The silent order. I traced the engraving with my finger. The cold metal felt heavier than it looked. The silent order, a name that had appeared once, faint and unconfirmed, in Victor Hale's private archives. An entity too powerful to belong to any country, too elusive to be tracked, too deep to be uprooted. That night, I stood in front of the mirror, gazing into the eyes of a man who had crossed the line between justice and vengeance. A man who had lost a wife, a friend, a father, and part of his soul to a war played in shadows. I knew the truth. The war wasn't over. It had only changed shape. I could walk away, disappear, let the silence consume me. Or I could walk forward, deeper into the silence, to become something else. I slipped the black card into my jacket, walked out into the wind, and watched the last light of dusk bleed across the sea. Let's see what game you have next. I murmured into the wind. This time, I won't just play. I'll run the board. The wind howled louder, and behind it, I heard the echo of a door opening to a place where morality dies quietly, and power only whispers. That evening, I stood in front of the old stone mansion, the address engraved on the silent orders card. It was hidden in the Scottish Highlands, far from any town, surrounded by nothing but wind, mist, and the kind of silence that felt ancient. I walked up the path alone. No security cameras, no guards, only a single wooden door that opened before I even knocked. Inside, the scent of oak and firewood filled the air. Dozens of candles burned slowly along the stone walls. And at the end of the long hall, a man sat waiting, face hidden in the shadows. He gestured toward the seat opposite him. "Welcome, Mr. Bennett." Or should I say, the man who brought down Hale. I didn't respond. He continued, voice calm, dry as winter ash. "We watch you navigate betrayal, war, silence, and control. You didn't just survive, Lucas. You adapted. You learned to bend morality without breaking completely. That's the kind of man we need." I finally spoke. "What do you want from me?" He leaned forward. Only then did I see his face, mid-50s, surgical in his coldness. Eyes like ice, a scar running down his temple. The kind of man who had killed, not once, but many times, and never lost sleep over it. "We want you to become something more. No longer the hunted, not even just the hunter, but the architect." I narrowed my eyes. "Of what?" He smiled faintly. "The next version of control, of silence, of order." He slid a folder across the table, thicker than any intelligence file I had seen. Inside, names, photos, transactions, plans, far more corrupt than Victor Hale ever dared dream of. "This is your first task, not a test, a proof of alignment." I looked at him, unblinking. "And if I refuse?" He chuckled softly. "You won't, because men like you don't retire. You transform." I looked down at the folder. Then slowly, I picked it up. As I left that night, the wind outside didn't feel like the Scottish wind anymore. It felt like history shifting. Epilogue. 3 weeks later, news broke in 3 countries. A multinational financial empire collapsed overnight. Several high-ranking officials were arrested without warning. One body, a Swiss banker, was found floating in the Rhone, his mouth stuffed with banknotes. No trace, no claim, only a symbol carved into a fountain wall in Zurich. Black medium small square. The silent order. I stood alone at a rooftop bar in Tokyo, whiskey in hand, watching the skyline shimmer under 1,000 neon scars. Behind me, another envelope awaited. Another name, another board to flip. My father had once told me, "Son, don't seek revenge. Live and erase what they stand for." He was right, but he was also wrong, because sometimes you can only erase monsters by becoming something darker. Not a monster, not a hero, just a man who learned. In a world built on whispers, silence is not peace. It's power.